Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today it is time to have a look at the stuff which wasn't on the updates 1.97 dev server, but was sat in the files for that dev server. Remember, when we talk about these vehicles and when we talk about these ideas, a lot of them may not come in this update, or they may come later on, either in events or future updates. So this is just kind of the extra stuff on top of what we've already seen. In this video we'll have a look at some ships which are now in the files, which are new, some other Swedish vehicles that weren't present in the tech tree, and also a few other little things as well that I will talk about, such as a very interesting Italian vehicle. Now, before we get started, I just would like to thank a few people. First of all, Father Gentlespie for doing a dev server Datamine. I'll make sure to leave a link in the description of this so you can go and read it yourself and have a look and see what was changed compared to the last update. I'd also like to thank Matrix for helping me with some of the information on some of these vehicles, since some of them have interesting ideas around them and it's kind of hard to pinpoint what part of history this specific one is from. So thank you guys for that. So let's get into the vehicles themselves. The first one we're going to have a look at is a familiar name but not a familiar face. This is the Kern, or K-O-L-N as it's known. We already have a Kern in the game, but it is a cruiser, the cruiser Kern, as you can see here, but the difference is we now have a frigate, the frigate being the frigate Kern. This was a 1960s frigate, and it was the first set of ships. If we have a look at the Kern class frigates, it was the first set of major warships that Germany built after World War II. They were commissioned in 1961, at least this specific one was, and it's definitely, you know, a lot more modern than many of the ships that we have in game, but it also kind of lacks a little bit of firepower in certain areas. So when we have a look at it, you can see this is its animated model, so it does seem to have some form of radar on it. I'm guessing that will eventually be added to the game. If this thing is, you know, added to the game, I'm sure it will be. It will be very odd to see a model like this and, you know, not sat there. But one thing to talk about this vehicle and also the other ship we're going to look at, they are both not normally labeled in the files as one which is coming to the tech tree. So what I mean by that is normally there is like a string of text or a string of code which is attached to these things, which tells you where it's going to be in the tech tree. So whether it's going to be before a machine or after a machine. This machine here, the Kern, and also the next ship that we're going to look at don't have those sets. So that normally indicates these are either going to be premium vehicles, or it indicates that these are going to be event vehicles. So that's something to think about, you know, going forward. So what does this frigate have? Well, the first thing is it has access to two 100mm guns. It has the METL 53 guns. It has one of them on the front that you can see here, and then one on the back as well. Helping out those guns, it has a few sets of 40mm, two dual sets of 40mm L70s, so they're the fast-firing 40mm, and also two single-barreled 40mm as well. So you can see the dual on the back here in this little array, and then you have one of the singles here. You can see the wonderful clip, magazine clip on top of it, looks really nice. Here's another one of the singles, and then you have a dual on the front. So overall, your main armament is two 100s and then 6 40mm guns. There is also some other stuff which is attached to it. The other armaments are 4 553mm torpedo tubes. At least from my point of view, when I look at this model though, this only has 2 torpedo tubes that I can find. We can have a look at the X-ray, there might be something that I'm missing. And it also has access to an interesting system, which a lot of these like kind of different vehicles have access to. So this has access to a quadruple launcher for a 375mm anti-submarine mortar. So yes, this thing has an absolutely god-awful chonky mortar on both sides of it, as you can see here, and it also has it all modelled in the X-ray view. So if we have a look at the X-ray, we can see the two torpedo tubes that this thing has at the back here, right near the engines. And by the way, this does have multi-engine, or it's got mixed engines, is the way that I put it, but it's basically got combined diesel and gas propulsion systems. So similar to a lot of the other Soviet ships out there, especially the frigates. So yeah, that's something to think about. But yeah, I can only find two torpedoes tubes on this thing. I can't find any more. So unless I'm missing some, maybe on the back here, but it looks like it also has access to some depth charges, so that'll be fun for it. But when we look at these mortars, these anti-submarine mortars, you can see them, the ammo rack is all modeled for them, so that would indicate to me that these things are actually going to be usable whenever, you know, this machine gets added to the game. You can also see the massive ammo rack that the 100mm has down here, and also all of the ammunition when it comes to extra mortars. It seems like this machine was very much built around the idea of these being incredibly useful. Then with the mixed propulsion system with the gas and diesel engines, you can see 4 engines here. You can see the huge transmissions, and also of course the funnels out of the side, which look impeccably modeled in the game. So this overall, the Kern looks really nice. I am very much looking forward to this vehicle. I kind of just want to see how it gets added. It is actually sat technically in rank 2 right now, which would mean that it's similar to a lot of the other machines, such as like the River class, the Chikugo, stuff like that. But also, you know, you have the K2 in rank 3 for the Germans. You also have the Project 35, which is a frigate for the Soviets in rank 3, but then again the Project 159, that is rank 2. So this could easily come into the game as a rank 2, which I think personally, just looking at it, it's looking like a 3.7 4.0 vehicle, but we'll have to see, you know, when it gets around. The next machine we're going to look at is the next ship on the menu, which is the London. And you can see right here, this is the HMS London. Now, the HMS London has kind of an interesting history, and the reason why its history is interesting is not really because of its combat prowess. It's more about the funny and dodgy refits that it had. So this is a county class machine. This is the same class as the HMS Kent, which we're getting in the game. So it has 8 8-inch guns in twin mounts. You can see 2 on the front here, and then it has 2 on the back here as its main armament. But where it differs from the Kent is everything else, and that's because of its refit. So in the interwar periods, but in the early years of the war, the HMS London actually went through 3 separate refits. And this was just because they wanted to keep adding more armor to it, they wanted to keep adding more stuff to it, and they also wanted to keep adding more and more guns to it. So this was kind of used as a testbed in a way for other county class ships to see if how much, you know, they could do to it and still, you know, make it useful. And unfortunately, they kind of hit the limit when it came to the amount of stuff they could add because of some factors that we'll talk about. So the version that you're seeing here, I am pretty sure is the version which is the one after the 1939 refit, which replaced a lot of it. It replaced the deck with a new superstructure. It put a new superstructure above the deck, which is like this area here, which is where it differs from the Kent. It also added a ridiculous amount of guns to the machine. So instead of the single 4 inches like the Kent has, this actually has dual sets of 4 inches. So it has double the secondary armament of the Kent, which is kind of lacking. And then they just added a ton of 40mm and 20mm to it. And what I mean by that is pom-pom 2-pounders and Oerlikon 20s. So this thing is just covered in AA. You know, there's if we just want to go from it, like from front to back, if you compare it to the HMS Kent, if you want to have a look at the, you know, the new naval vehicles video I talked about, about, you can compare it, and this thing just blows it out of the water when it comes to secondary armament. So on top of the main guns, you have 20mm, then you have 2 single 40mm, which are flanking the 2 main guns on the front. Then if you go back a bit, you have some more 20mm on either side of it, and then you get this monstrosity. So what is this? This is like an octo pom-pom. I don't know how else to put it. So this is 8 40mm or 8 pom-pom guns all together in one wonderful mount, and it looks like it is used by 2 people, and this is on both sides. So this technically is 16 pom-poms in this one little area, which is just devastating to think about if you are an aircraft coming in. And it doesn't stop there. So here we have, you know, tons more 20mm added to it. Then of course the upgraded guns that we talked about before, where they added some more, then some more 20mm, more 40mm, and we're not done there because we have some more 20s up here. So as you can see, this machine just is stacked chock-a-block full of AA and full of 40mm, which is really, really nice to see. It also keeps the torpedo tubes from the other county classes, so this thing actually has 8 torpedoes in total, and it has, you know, 4 either side, so you can use them. But yeah, this is, and the armament isn't the only upgrade that the HMS London had. The interesting bit about it is the bit that kind of broke the camel's back with it. So yes, they added all of this stuff plus a ton of radar to the HMS London, but the thing that broke it was they added a 3.5-inch cemented armored belt. It was 8 feet deep down from the main armored deck, which covered the machinery pieces. So they added way more extra armor to it compared to before. Then the reconstruction of this was finally completed in 1941, and then it was the idea was to actually refit all of the other county classes in this way, but that never happened. So this is kind of a unique vehicle in that sense, where it was one of the only ones which was upgraded to this standard that we talk about. So what happened? Well, the HMS London, after this refit, actually needed some repairs, while after going after the battleship Bismarck in the May of 1941, what it found was, while it was at sea, there was a bunch of cracks that came in the upper deck and hull. So this was basically because of the new superstructure causing stress on it. So they brought it back to the River Tyne, which is in the north of England. They repaired it until February 1942. Then it was sent to the North Atlantic to help and aid with convoys, and this generally also screwed the HMS London because there was a bunch of, you know, North Atlantic seas which were incredibly heavy at the time, and therefore the hull once again cracked, popped rivets in the lower hull, and this meant that it had to go into dry dock in December 1942 to once again strengthen the hull and for fitting a newer and more refined radar to it, and also more anti-aircraft guns on top of it. So the refit rectified the hull, completed in May 1943, and the ship was ready for sea in July as well. And after sea trials and loading of ammunition, she was assigned to operate off the South African coast and be part of the Eastern Fleet. So this version that we see here, depending on, you know, what we look at, this is either the 1941 refit or the 1943 refit. So yeah, it's just a completely insane machine, and mainly they just experimented way too much with it and just pretty much broke it, which is something to really behold. It's also got, you know, a bunch of ammo racks at the bottom, and you can see all of the guns all over it, especially in the center. And maybe this is the, you know, heavy cruiser that Britain needs to give it, you know, some decent AA armament, because that HMS Kent, I don't think, is going to crack it. So the next machines we're going to look at are, of course, the Swedish ones. So we'll start off with some of the STRVs, which weren't added in the dev server. So the STRV-74. I actually had a few people hit me up on Twitter saying that it was really sad to see that the STRV-74 wasn't in the tech tree. Well, it's in the files. It seems like there's a problem with the tracks, but that was something that I saw on a few of the vehicles. But the STRV-74 is actually in the files in two separate forms. So this is the first one. This is just the standard STRV-74. You can see that it has access to the 75mm, also has access to the really long turret and really thin, turrets that it has. And if you didn't know, like, the story of the STRV or the Stridsvagn 74, this is a vehicle that was used in the late 50s to the early 80s for Sweden, and it was pretty much designed to repurpose some old hulls that they had. So they wanted to repurpose the Stridsvagn M42, so they got the chassis used to build those old tanks, and also used certain more modern techniques to try and make it a little bit better. So this chassis is very much a World War II chassis, which they put a turret on, which and added the 75mm Canon STRV-74 to it. It does have two engines in it, two gasoline ones, 170 horsepower each, so you're talking about 340 horsepower overall, and it has a power to weight of 13 horsepower per ton. So nothing to write home about, but it is nice to have the turret. It is nice to see, this vehicle in the game. And also it has, of course, the 7.5mm as well on the top of it. I don't think this is a 50 cal. It doesn't look like a 50 cal to me. It also has access to smoke in some really nice little areas, and it's going to be interesting to see if we do get a second dev server, or if this thing just comes to life, to see how the armor actually works properly. Like, is it going to be able to bounce stuff? Is it not? Because the general armor on the machine, in a maximum thickness, it should be around about 80mm, and I'm sure that's talking about the turrets, because this, this chassis is definitely not 80mm. It is incredibly angled in areas, though, so that is something to watch out for. I'm sure there will be some really nice ricochets from that. So this is the first version of the STRV-74, and now you have another one. So what this one does is, if you compare the two models, the difference is this one gets rid of the top-mounted gun, plus it also gets rid of the smoke grenades and some other external modules, and adds some more. And I've hit the wrong button. There we go. So it removes some stuff, but it mainly adds a system which can carry RB-52s. Now, if you're not familiar with RB-52s, I'll just quickly check, because I don't want to get this wrong, but I'm pretty sure RB-52s are AMX. I believe that they are SS-11s. Yes, they are. So the fact is, when we talk about, the SS-11s, this is what you will find on this machine. It will be an STRV-74 with at least two of them on, so one in this holding, maybe two over here, so maybe three in total, and it will be kind of similar to the British, Centurion Premium, with access to the missiles. So I'm guessing the idea is to give this a little bit of pizzazz, give this a little bit of difference compared to some of the other machines. And the way that they're doing it is with missiles. So that will be at least a little bit of fun for the machine. And I'm wondering what BR that will make it, because obviously with this machine, with the 75mm, my guess would be around about, like, maybe at most 5.7, probably lower than that. But with the missiles, with the SS-11s, anything is possible when it comes to this machine. So that'll be fun. And as I said, it's really nice to see the base modeling game. Hopefully we see more of these wonderful Swedish designs. The Swedish tech tree overall is looking like a banger, by the way. I'm really enjoying it. So one of the things as well is we did have two new STRVs on the dev server. We had the STRV-103A, and we also had the STRV-103C, which is this one here, which has the much more upgraded armor. It has obviously the fence for annihilating heat, and also, it has a slightly better system. Before we get on to that, though, I should probably show the X-ray of the STRV X-ray, there we go, just to show you what's inside. So it does have access to, as you can see, missiles. It has a 4-man crew, 3 in the turret, and then 1 dude down here. The ammunition, the first ammo rack is right here, and it also has the 2 engines at the back, as we talked about before. So screw, you know, a single engine, let's get 2. There's also just a slight little bit of ammo back here, which just seems like a horrible idea, but it is how it is. Anyway, so yeah, we have the STRV-103A, and then we had the STRV-103C. But there is a third one, which at least should be in the tech tree, because we have this one, which is the premium right now at 7.7. This one was at 7.7 on the dev server. This was the 8.7 one with APF SDS and better armor. What about this one, though? This is the STRV-103B. So this is the one which is between the A and the C, which is what we saw on the dev server. And for me, it pretty much looks like it has slightly less armor than the other STRV. One of the main things that I see from the C, which is quite a large upgrade, which I'm sure many probably either won't know about or won't think about. Yes, you know, the heat fence is nice. Yes, the extra armor on the side is nice. But this here, this extra armor around the gun, is kind of life-changing for the STRV. The STRV has a massive weak spot there. Now, you can see it right here. And the reason why it's a weak spot is because it's easily penetrable, and also a bunch of the crew sits behind in these chairs, so you can knock out the crew really easily through that. But the STRV-103C gets rid of that. The B, though, doesn't. So the B just, you know, has slightly different armor on the front. It still keeps the fence, which is kind of nice. So at least, you know, we have that going for it. And the STRV-103B also has a gas turbine engine. So this thing will have more power to it than the A and also the STRV-103-0. So that'll be really nice to see. It should be the first one which has decent, you know, maneuverability around the place, and should be similar to the B. My guess would be they're not going to give this thing APF SDS, but they'll give it the upgraded engine, so then it'll be at like 8.0, 8.3 or something, so you can have 3 middling STRVs around the place. The next Swedish vehicle to have a look at is the STRV M41S1. We'll just cover this one quickly since it's not very different to one that we already saw. This is basically a very similar vehicle to the Panzer 38T. There was already one in the tech tree, the S2, which you can see here, and then the S1 is this vehicle. So it is slightly different. The turret is slightly different to it. The also wheels are slightly different, but I'm not sure how that's going to affect anything. If we have a look at the X-ray is very similar to each other. Like the only difference seems to be the dancing motion that the driver is doing. He's either driving upwards or driving downwards. So I'm not sure there's really anything that's going to be different about these vehicles. They should be very similar in playstyle, just slightly different models on the outside. Now the big Wamba Chamba. So what is the top tier of Sweden looking like? Well, we already had the CV90, right? The CV90 120. We also had the top tier AA is looking really nice. Boom. This is the STRV-122B. So not just the 122, but the 122B. This is a very interesting vehicle from the Swedish, and it is still, I believe, in service today, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, it's still in service, the Stridsvagn 122. I'm sure it's not exactly in the configuration that you see it, but the STRV-122B is a Leopard. It's an exported Leopard with Swedish improvements. So during the 1990s, the Swedish did a bunch of tests between different nations to try and work out what they wanted for their next form of MBT. They were thinking to either build one or they wanted to import one. Eventually it was decided, because of cost and also other factors, that they were going to import a vehicle, and then they would, you know, basically build on top of it an armor package they were happy with and put in the systems that they wanted to see. And what happened after the tests, where they trialed build stuff such as the Abrams, even stuff such as the T-80 and the Leopard 2 in various forms, and also a very early version of the Leclerc, they decided to go for the Leopard. So what they did is they got a Leopard 2 improved, which is kind of a prototype version of a Leopard 2A5. It's more of just an improvement over the Leopard 2A4. They gave it the wedged shape armor, which you see on the Leopard 2A5, but it wasn't as, you know, the 2A5 was like the more refined version of the Leopard 2 improved. So they took that and then they built on top of it their own stuff. So their own fire control systems, their own armor packages, and everything else. And this is the culmination that you see in the game. This is that vehicle. So the best way to put it, or the closest equivalent that we have in game to this, is the Leopard 2A5. It is different to the Leopard 2A5 when it comes to its looks and when it comes to its characteristics, but generally it should have the same uses in game. It was kind of surprising to see this. I was definitely of the opinion that the Swedish wouldn't get that, you know, high of a tier of a vehicle, but it looks like they are coming into game in a storm with this. It also has the Rheinmetall 120mm and obviously the, you know, wedge armor on the front that you can see, and the composite armor that it has. I'll just show you the x-ray so you can see where the composite armor is on this. There we go. It's a little bit shiny, but you get the ideas. It's covered in composite armor. Very similar layout to what you would find in the Leopard 2A5. It's also got obviously some ammo in the front and that ammo rack in the back. You know, the first stage ammo stowage, and then obviously it has the 4-man crew in the in the vehicle, but I can only, oh no, there he is. Yeah, there's the third guy in the turret. So there is, I believe, let's just check actually. Yes, it is a 4-man crew, 3 in the turrets, you know, a loader, a gunner, a commander, and then of course, you know, you have the driver down there. You also have the optical system, which is actually modeled in the X-ray. My guess is this is going to be, you know, obviously thermals and stuff like that, but it should have all of the bells and whistles that all of the other top tier MBTs have, maybe even plus a few other systems. You know, we've been talking in the past and maybe even in the present about APS systems and how, you know, it'd be interesting to see them. This would definitely be one of those vehicles that could access those style of systems. It also has the composite that is on it. It is known as modular AMAP or AMAP, and it's from the IBD Desenroth. It gives them 360 degrees protection against pretty much anything that you can find. Obviously, being a 1990s or late 1990s vehicle, this actually entered service in 1997, so it will be one of the more modern tanks in the game, if not the most modern, if we just talk about when it's entered service. The other fact is it is fully classified. So once again, it's one of those vehicles at top tier where we have no idea what its armor stats are, we have no idea what it's capable of doing, but it looks really nice and a lot of people can equate to it because they've probably seen it in real life. So yeah, it's just one of those vehicles, and it will be a lovely crown on the Swedish tree along with the CV90-120, which I'm personally looking forward to. The last vehicle is the special Italian one I talked about before, and this is one which will either induce wonder or induce tears. At least for me, it's a little bit of both. This is the Centauro MGS 120, or the Centauro 120. Yes, the model isn't fully finished. You can see that the textures aren't fully there yet, so this is the least complete out of the rest. The other ones are complete. You know, they have all their models in game, they have all the x-rays, they have everything done. This one still needs to be HDified, let's call it. Now, the Centauro MGS 120 is very simple. It's a Centauro with a 120. I don't know how else to put it. It looks like it has exactly the same gun as the CV90-120, so we're probably looking at something firing DM33, DM23, all that stuff. And if you compare it to the normal Centauro, The major differences that we see between them is that the 120 is a little bit beefier, it has a little bit more armor to it, and it also has a slightly different turret. So it looks way more modernized, it looks way more angled, and because of that, way more interesting. Has smokes obviously on the front of it, and also seems to have optics which would look or make it look like it's going to have thermals on it. It would be incredibly surprising if this thing doesn't have thermals on it, but you can see even up here it has some like extra armor on the sides all the way down the vehicle, like all the way down the sides of the vehicle to up here, where it just has that little bit of extra. So maybe at some point, you know, this, when it comes to the game, this armor will be useful against, you know, lighter vehicles, but it ain't going to be very useful against really much anything else. Maybe it takes it out of that hull break bracket that we've seen before. It also has some armor internally, which is something we see with a lot of these modern vehicles, just because of the fact that, you know, it's pushed the engine block away from, you know, the actual crew, and then it's once again a 4-man crew, 3 in the turret, 1 driver in the bottom, who is a lonely boy. It has a 50 cal on the top of it as well, plus what looks like an MG3, and also I believe it has a coaxial MG3 as well. Or it has a coaxial something, but yeah, it's an MG3, and it has the you know, the ammo rack in the back here. It's my guess is it's manually loaded, just because of how the crew's set out. It could be an autoloader though. We'll have to see. And also it has what looks like some form of standard ammunition. And my guess is that is smoke, and this is APFSDS, which is what everybody will fire. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting vehicles just sat in the files here. You know, the STRVs, of course. The 74 for me is just wonderful to see. The 122, and of course the Kern and the HMS London, but the Centauro definitely caps it off in a wonderful way. Hopefully we see these vehicles in update 1.97, and if we don't, then it's something to look forward to later on when it comes to events and stuff like that. Anyway, I hope you all have enjoyed this video. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I just want to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Chris Giltnane, Daniel Stanton, Jay Wilt, John Ryman, Martinez, Super Cacti, Trigger Hippie, Eugens Terry, and also Elove Goat and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.